Well, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. And before I start, I'll introduce myself. I'm Kate Katomski.
I'm Judd Mulkerin.
And we've been working together since 2003. We met in 2002 at an art event in Maine, and Judd was performing and playing with his band, and I was doing an art installation. And we didn't see one another's performance. We were both working, and I happened to walk by Judd.
Kate comes out in front, and I was off the stage, and so like a 13-year-old, I'm doing handstands. Did you see my band? Did you see my band? No, I was doing my own project. Whoa. So the story, it was history after that. So the rest was history after that.
So we're here tonight because of Susan Knowles and Susan's passion for marble, which I also have a very strong passion for. So I'd really love to thank you, Susan, for what you've done to bring Judd and I here, and David Butler for your support of the project, Beauvais Lyons for taking it on because he knew he had a total novice as a lithographer, but he was a risk taker like I was. We both kind of jumped off the cliff together, and he's a brilliant man, along with my husband, who I have made 2 collaborations to create the Quarry Project Tennessee. This is really, truly a collaboration and a mix of minds. Judd and I made our first performance together after knowing one another for a year. And we took what I was doing solo and made it a group effort where I was writing with hair on a piece of silk, 30 feet long, the words of Judd's song that was based on Leaves of Grass by Walt Whitman. And we did it in response to the war in Iraq. And the Creative Time, which is a really great art funding program in New York City, got this great platform with a megaphone that is 30 feet long. It was designed by architects and a landscape designer over 15 years ago, and it's traveled around the country. And they brought it back to New York City in Foley Square, and it was projected out at City Hall, and they were asking for anyone, performers, artists, poets, writers, to come up and speak out. So they called it the Megaphone Monument, and we made a piece called Returning Stones, and I spelled returning wrong. And
so we changed, we didn't use Walt Whitman's words. The project originally started with that, but that was relevant to the Civil War. So we wanted to bring it into the future, and so we created an entirely new set of words for it. And that's what Kate had stitched into the fabric. And the Megaphone Monument, that thing was so cool. The bell of that. It's 7 feet big, and it was just so many people involved, and it was really a lot of fun.
We included, what was different for me is I'd never worked with people with performance. I was on the board of doing art performances as a solo artist. This was the first time I had worked with a musician, and we also had other people taking that 30-foot length of ribbon of a poem into the audience with me, and we were like dancers with the ribbon, just walking it through the audience as they heard Judd performing it. This was my first piece in which I was using fabric as a screen, sheer fabric, to project moving image onto. And I had done a sleep performance in a gallery on a bed of sod, documented that, and created this stage with the bed of sod and the sheer fabrics that surrounded my theater. And from that, it influenced every installation I've done with projected image. I don't use the classic scrim. I take sheer fabric, sew it, and drape it, like Christo does his buildings. And my first installation onto a building projection was projecting this. And so it was really amazing to watch that fabric move on the building, like Christo wraps his buildings.
We projected that into a building in Portland. It was really cool.
The Quarry Project, while Judd and I were working on these other projects together, and we performed those in several places throughout the Northeast, including galleries. I would sit in the gallery and sew with the hair and would perform. I was working on the Quarry Project Vermont. and some of this might be repetitive for those of you that saw the prints, but I've always been very aware and very connected to the Vermont quarries because my father grew up in West Rutland, Vermont, which is a very small town in a valley of marble hubs in Vermont, outside of Rutland. And the mountains themselves are called gumdrops. They're literally like just little mounds, and they're full of marble. And they were old farmers would take and they found it, and they would use it mostly for tombstones and to create steps and foundations for their houses when they first started. And a man by the name of Redfield Proctor, who was a lawyer, studied at Dartmouth, was in the Civil War, was given these quarries to run, and he made an amazing industry where he started to buy quarries up in Colorado, in Wisconsin, Ohio, Vermont, New York, and he was involved with the quarries here in Tennessee. Tennessee had already had its industry going, but he was very attracted, like everyone else, to pink Tennessee marble. So the relationship between Vermont and Tennessee was established in the late 1880s through Proctor. Proctor, like most other industrialists, became a politician. He made this incredibly successful company called Vermont Marble Company, and then he became a lieutenant governor, the governor of Vermont. He was a state senator, and then he became a U.S. senator in D.C. And that, I really do feel, is why all these buildings from Tennessee marble and Vermont marble was used in those structures in D.C.
It's hard to believe that a politician could get a product that was made in their states into projects for I know it's hard to believe, but...
And so from that, I was teaching in New York. I was a sculpture teacher there. And my dad was born in West Rutland. My grandfather was a quarryman. He was a channel machine operator.
And you guys said here these stories as kids all the time.
My dad is a great storyteller. And so you knew about the quarries, and he loved it. He had great pride from this very small town he was from. And while I was teaching, and we had gone there several times as a kid, and we went into this great museum called the Vermont Marble Company. I was just learning geology. We went into the Vermont Marble Museum, and I just studied geology, and I was crazed by it, but I was in 5th grade then. And then I saw this sign when I was teaching in New York in 1993, I think it was, a little 4x6 index card saying that artists can go to the West Rutland Quarry to learn how to sculpt marble. And I'm like, wow, that's Grandpa and Dad's quarry. So I went up in the first visit there with a friend of mine, was in 1995, and it was a ruin. And it was this post-industrial landscape with the old gang saw mill, totally broken into, but so incredibly beautiful. And I really thought of the romantic notion that the sublime beauty of the ruin, and that, like the rest, they really believe that nature dominates what man creates, and that this whole area was being taken over by nature.
It is truly beautiful. I read a book years ago. It was an old science fiction book, but it was called The Earth Abides. No matter what man builds, the earth will come back and take it back. And you're watching. Man has stripped all of this wealth from the earth, and now the earth will abide. It's coming back. So that process, watching it happen, it's truly beautiful.
Bertinsky, who also did a lot of photographing of the Vermont quarries. I didn't know about his work when I started this, and he was starting it too, and his photographs, of course, incredible. But he said that we've always taken the natural resources of the earth and used them they're abundant, they're beautiful, and we take and use them. But we need to be we also are the custodians of this. And I feel that people like Susan and I, are custodians of this history, this story, of these particular towns. So as you walk these platforms, this is the old, the railroad bed is right between these pillars, And that's where they would move the marble from the north and south and throughout the United States. And the old derrick, which is basically the crane that would take the marble from the quarries. But I went up there with my dad. I took him back in 1999 to show him these quarries. And this is where my project started, because my dad at that point was in his mid to late 80s. He's 96 now. Both my parents are both 96 and still alive. And he turned into this 26-year-old young man, jumping these blocks of marble and demonstrating and performing what it was like to work there. And the one performance that I call the performance, he choreographed what they called plug and feather, where a gang of men would line up and hammer into the block of marble, and where they would move one after another like a dance, and they would get a rhythm going around the block. And from that, the marble would break off and come off the earth. And I was just like so enraptured by his story that I knew at this point this was going to be, though it's becoming my lifelong project.
Real simple description of this is what they do is there's a machine called a channel machine, and that drills vertical holes. And then they have a broach machine which drills horizontal holes. So you have holes going down the back line of, say you want a block of marble that's, say it's the width of one of these squares. So you would come to the back side of the shelf that you're on, and you would drill your holes this way, and then you would come down to the front, down to the next stage, and you would broach into the side of it. So as you drive these wedges in, the plug and feather, like Kate's saying, there are two little L-shaped fingers that go down into the hole that's just been drilled, and then you put the plug into it, which is a chisel, and you have this line of men, and you have all these holes filled up, and it depends on how many how long it is. They'll be maybe a couple inches apart. You have a lot of them. So the first man hits his piece, and then he walks forward and hits the next one, and next one, and he's followed by all these people, and as they're going down the line, it's like Kate said, it's almost a dance. But what's happening is the wedges are progressively going deeper and deeper, and the pressure builds to a point where it splits the marble. So that's the process. So when you see all those holes, you're looking at it and you go, I'm only seeing half a hole. Well, the other half is on the block that split off, because that was the process.
So I went back after taking my dad, and we went back again in 2003, just the same summer that I met Judd, just before I met Judd. And I took and I spent
a year.
yeah, exactly. I spent a week just walking in the quarries and sketching and photographing and really getting a sense of place and the cultural history of it, and really starting to hear and listen to what occurred in the past. And then certainly when my dad came, and I videoed him for 2 hours, and he told me the stories, and I asked him to kind of repeat some of the things we had gone through before. And then that's where I discovered the Vermont Marble Museum, and they have an incredible collection of archival historical images that they said an artist has never talked about doing this as a project, and they would let me work with the glass plates. And so they were just very open and generous for me taking this project on. So that was the beginning of it. And I then took these pieces. I'm going to go back to this. This has been a very long project, the one in Vermont. It started, well, now it's 15 years ago, where I did the research to find, that's when I discovered that the architecture that was made from this. The way I found out was when I was at the quarries. It's now, as I said, a very small sculpture center. It's growing. It's a quite wonderful place if you're an artist and you want to learn how to sculpt. And there was a little 8x10 photograph of the Jefferson Memorial. And I asked them, I said, well, what was that about? And this is in their kitchen. And they said that the quarries there built the Jefferson Memorial. And then when I went over it, which I was astonished, I thought, my God, no one even knows this about this place. So I started to do writing, and I collected all these images, and I went back and I learned how to do sculpture myself, and I became very aware of the marble dust. And there, the marble, it's white, it's very white, it's different than Tennessee's. And as Michelangelo said, with this white marble from Carrara, which this marble is equal, if not superior to Carrara, and Italians came from Italy in order to sculpt with this marble. It does break off like sugar, and it's like you're in a sea of snow, and it's blinding when you're working with it. But it's also everlasting. You do not get rid of it. So I started to take...
There's some of it in our basement.
Yeah, it does not go away. So I started to take some of this. I decided I wanted to do something with the dust. And I started to do these text pieces of the writings I was doing of the quarry. And I etched them into glass. And these are an inch and a half deep. And then I'd fill them up with the marble dust. Along with that, with all the documentation, I started to do printmaking, which was a perfect process for me to take these layers of the past and of the present. And I worked with the archival images, I did my own etchings, but in the background, I taught art history in New York for 20 years as well. And I had read that they used to prepare the oil panels with marble dust. Because I also said, what can I do with this dust? So I figured out, I did research on how they would adhere the marble dust to the wood panels, so I decided to do that with my prints. And it gives this incredibly beautiful, soft iridescence to the background. And it's like I felt I was on to something. And again, I was in a studio at Maine College of Art. I was doing a residency there. And they were into me experimenting and perhaps getting the marble dust in the sink. So they started off very literal in the beginning, these series of prints, and they became more abstract as does happen with time along with this landscape. And what these prints do, and the prints that I did for the Tennessee project, is they help create the narrative of what I'm going to eventually do in the immersive environment, because I knew I wanted to do an immersive environment there. So essentially, between the drawing, the photographing, the layering in my prints, I was mapping what I was going to do in the final production. I was in a sense, I was the cartographer of the story. And it was including oral histories and my own history and other quarrymen that I met. This is the quarry I decided to do the immersive in. And we did this in 2014. Judd and I worked on this together. We chose this quarry because it was the quarry my grandfather worked in. And it was, when you go to them, what I knew when I was drawing around them before I met Judd, that this was a natural amphitheater. And that the sound would, because in Vermont they're left with 3 walls, and that it would hit those walls and it would just project out. Also, they're filled with water, they're old I knew them as swimming holes. But I knew that the water would also act as a wonderful reflector. And I also chose this quarry because the image on your right is an old ruin that's just hanging on the ledge there. And the story behind that was the platform where the stairs went down into the quarries. Now the quarries in Vermont are deep. They're hundreds of feet deep. Some people told us 600 feet deep. And
that's a 60-story
building that they would go down.
That deep to quarry marble. It's amazing.
But that platform is, my dad would bring his father lunch, and all the kids would bring the father's lunch, and they would come out of the quarry and meet the children and
bring them up in baskets with that crane, the dairy crane. You would put in the basket and they would bring them up. Because can you imagine walking up a 60-story building?
Oh, those
set of stairs.
So I decided, because of that story too, and I loved this particular quarry, this is where we decided to do the immersion.
That's now called grandfather's lunch. That's what we call it.
So we took our sheer screen and did a double layer of it this time. And we knew that the projection would hit the screen, then go beyond and hit the quarry wall because it's sheer, and then reflect onto the water. So essentially what we made was a 3-dimensional block is what it looked like. And then with the sound of the men hammering and the music we had, we were interested in getting the rhythm of men working. And why don't you speak about do you want to speak about that?
You're doing good. That's basically what it was. When I compose these scores for the pieces, I try to think about what it is we're trying to project. I don't know if you've ever watched a movie and turned the sound off and it's like, yeah, it's not so good. So to do a successful score, you need to try to interpret what the image is saying. So what I was seeing here, what we were trying to bring across was the rhythm of people working together. And it has to be a type of music that would represent working people. And I couldn't think of a better style than a blues style. So this particular piece became a blues song. And it was built around the tempo and the rhythm of groups of people working together and hammering, going down that line. So that was what it brought up. There's also, in this piece, I also wanted to, and I have, throughout my life, I've had situations, being a musician, you're not always working. So you're doing physical labor, and I've worked really hard, and I know what that's like. And to have that be your whole life, that's also sometimes painful. So there's a haunting piece behind it. So I try to bring those types of things.
We also had it lit by a gentleman by the name of Brian Dolly. And he and I speak of James Turrell, who was a wonderful light artist. And he and I have a very kindred appreciation for his work. So he lit very little spots around the quarry, and this quarry was about 100 feet wide. And so you walked into it, and you would hear this sound, and different elements of the quarry were lit, and then the images were being projected into the quarry, onto the water, and onto the sheer fabric. This one, I think, really gives you that sense of a three-dimensional piece.
So
And we
big is
did-
that piece of scrim?
Excuse me?
How big is that piece of?
That scrim was 20 by, was that?
Yeah, it's 20 by 25-ish.
Yeah.
I was trying to,
No.
I was thinking about aspect ratio for the video. So when you're projecting it, you want it to at least match somewhat. So, yeah, was it more?
Might have been 30.
30. Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
Might have been 30.
Somewhere around 20 to 25 to 20 to
Good
30.
question, Andy.
I'll put it to you this way, stringing a cable across that quarry for 150 feet from side to side, a guy that worked at the quarry, Jonathan, you don't remember his last name. Lafarge, yeah. Anyway, he got in a canoe, and he was paddling across. We got the thing strung, and then we had to put it on a tube that ran across there, and then I had to have other wires on it so we could adjust it. But you just can't stick it out in the middle of the water, because like I said, that's could be 600 feet down if you fall in that water.
And that day it poured.
Yeah.
It was absolutely pouring. So we had put the screen up, and we go down to the quarry to get ready to do the projection, and the screen had just sunken into the pouring water.
Well, we had to pull it back out.
We had to pull it back
readjust
out.
it. So I was so glad I put those readjustment cables on and saved it.
And when you do these outside events, it's like you can't control the weather. You just have to learn to go with it and figure it out. So after that piece, well, actually before that piece, we had come. That was in 2014. We had visited Tennessee, and we had gone to Iams Nature Center and visited Susan Knowles. And we came up here, and she told us to connect with Paul James, and he gave us a tour of Iams. And I started to photograph Iams, and we used this particular photo in the prints for Tennessee. And then as you go over the bridge down into the keyhole, this is where I was just swept away by this landscape. And it's once again, it was that sublime beauty of this ruin that was so primitive. I've never seen anything like this before, and I was just like, wow, I would love to do a projection into this quarry. So we went back to Vermont and we finished it. So we did take some aspects from the projection we used in Vermont and combined it with the one we did for the Quarry Project Tennessee, because the two areas have been connected for so long.
There's one real quick little story that you didn't tell, which I think is fascinating. We were talking with Monica Gow from Tennessee Marble Company, and Monica grew up in West Rutland, Vermont. Her father was a marble worker, not a marble worker. He had a company where they did monuments and they post-processed marble that was quarried. He ended up buying the West Rutland quarries. We were talking to her about this whole connection thing, and all of a sudden, we find out that Monica's grandfather was Polish, was about the same age as Kate's grandfather. This is a very small community in West Rutland that is made up of immigrants from other countries. You would have an Italian group, they had their own church. You'd have a Polish group, they'd have their own church and social clubs. You'd have the Swedes were there, the Irish were there, you know, all these different groups, nationality groups, and they all talked to each other. It wasn't like there was animosity, but we were thinking that I bet Monica Gowitt's grandfather and Kate's grandfather had to at least know each other, being in a small, tight-knit community like that, and now she has Tennessee Marble Company. That is a connection,
Yeah.
past and present.
Yeah, she, I don't know if all of you know, Monica Gowitt owns it and is the head of the Vermont Marble Company in Friendsville. Tennessee Marble Company, sorry. So, yeah, Monica and I, we really were sharing these individual stories that we were really noticing that they very well do blend. Yeah, thank you for that. I meant to bring that
That's
up.
a great.
Yeah. So I chose the keyhole as a place to do the projection, and Susan Knowles invited Judd and I into this fantastic journey we've been on for the last, intensely for the last year, to do an installation here in one of the quarries eventually in Knoxville. And then so she approached Beauvais Lyons at the University of Tennessee to perhaps me come and do some prints down here, because the prints is what really makes me learn about the culture and the place. And so I knew I had to be here, and Susan knew that as well. So she approached Beauvais, and he heard of doing marble lithography. And I had never done lithography, and I made him very aware of that I was a total greenhorn with this. I had never done it. But he assured me that with his guidance, we could successfully come up with some work. And collaborations are wonderful for the most part. If you allow yourself to open up, they can also be very intimidating. But we took it on, and we used the key. I chose the keyhole as the image that would go onto the piece of marble. And from there, he knew I did layering in my work in the past, so he suggested I bring in some stone marble rubbings, and I chose some of the images from the collection here at the McClung Historical Library. And I chose images that were about quarry workers, and I was really interested in who worked in the quarries here. In Vermont, I knew it was the European immigrants that came directly from Europe. And here I was really interested about the African American workers. So these are the photographs I decided to choose for the project. So these are the photographic plates that Beauvais and I worked with when we did the layering of the images in the lithography. And the architectural structures I chose was the Supreme Court building, because Tennessee constructed the spiral staircase here. They got the marble from both Vermont and from Alabama, but they made them here, and then they put them on the railroad cars and took them to DC. And I've loved the symmetry and the design of the spiral, so I wanted that as part of the image. That portal, lintel right there, is the 30-foot lintel above the portal of the National Gallery of Art. And it was made here, and then they put it on 2 flat cars.
We're laughing because you'll see this in the movie. We took
Shelton Hastings.
Right. We took oral history from people, and Shelton Hastings, who worked at Brown from 1947 to 1950, because I've heard that 100,000 times between putting this together, because you have to listen to this over and over while you're building the soundtrack. And we're laughing a little bit because one of those little sections, as he talks about how they pulled this out of the quarry, with 2 derrick cranes and put it on 2 railroad flat cars. So that his phrase keeps echoing in our head. It's an amazing thing. They put it on pivots. So these 2 flat cars are traveling down to Washington, D.C., going around corners, and this lintel straight. As the train is bending and articulating to get all the way down there. And this was the only place in the country where they could find a solid piece of marble that long that was free of defects so that it could support that kind of weight and go that long. So that's an amazing thing. And they made 2 of them because one of them did break. And they do all that work and then it breaks out. Oh my God. So anyway, it was interesting. We're giggling a little bit because we've heard 2 railroad flat cars.
We've been working very hard. The architecture that I did choose too is that, as I said before, Vermont was involved with it. Now, inside the National Gallery of Art are all the columns are from Vermont. So these companies definitely built some beautiful structures together. So that's why I chose them. But these are just a few of the ones. Like in New York, Monica Gowitt reconstructed the marble, and I did not know this when I lived in New York. I just moved up to Maine full-time, being in New York for 30 years. But the incredible Grand Central Station, the interior of that is all Tennessee marble, which I think is so incredible. And she reconstructed it, and she's the one that told us that story. So we used that part of her story in ours. This is a print that's up in the lobby of the museum here right now. This uses the keystone along with the layering of 2 of the images of the quarry workers.
Is everybody familiar with what the keystone is when we say the keystone? Okay. That's in Iams. It's a section, I saw some heads nodding and others not, but they took refuse block and built it up and then to make a bridge, and then they left a space at the bottom so that you could walk through. I might not have the story absolutely correct, but that's what's there. And then you could travel through, and that's been known as the Keep. It's an amazing place. If you haven't been to that and walked out there during the summer, it's something to go look at.
We did use the prints in the video. I've never put my prints in projected image before, but it was funny. We were trying to figure out what we were going to do because after the prints, Judd came down. We did some more research, and we were trying to figure out how we had to get the video made within that month. And we both thought, we woke up the next morning and we both thought, let's put the prints in. And he had a way of
I said, you've got to put your prints in.
Yeah, he wanted the and we both thought about it. This particular piece is the quarry that I took from the photograph that I took. That's the quarry that the 30-foot piece of the lintel came out of, which I thought, I didn't know that when I photographed it. When I found out it afterward, I thought that intuition was amazing. And we had the absolute honor when we were here, that when I did the prints, to go out to Tennessee Marble Company, and it was so incredibly beautiful. It is rich. The Tennessee marble is very special. And the depth of the cedar is like, it was just like these blocks that came out. I never knew that that it looked like this, that it's so earth-like, yet the sheet of marble.
This brown earth must be rich in iron ore. It has such a red hue to it. But when these are, sorry for walking in front of you. When they pull it out, to stand there, it almost gives you the impression that the earth is bleeding.
Yeah, because there was a lot of water there. It was quite a wonderful moment, and I've never seen it, to see everything active. Because all the quarries in Vermont are abandoned. There's one working, Danby, but they don't let people go in there because of the danger of it. You just can't go in there, but we had the opportunity. And so that's what we will be showing you tonight, our gift to you of seeing the beauty and really understanding the beauty of this marble and what created the identity in this city, and that it is your history, your cultural history, and it's really wonderful to share it with you. We did take the video, and we had the...
Let me explain a little bit about our process.
Okay.
We put together a series of images to project, and then we project them onto fabric, and then we make a video of that. So the original first video that's produced doesn't have any fabric in it. It's all real sharp, crisp, clear images, and it's just very straightforward. That's where the soundtrack gets created. That's where all the motion happens. Then we project that onto fabric, and then what you're going to see tonight is that process, the finishing piece. So there's two. So when Kate says when we're building the video, she's talking about the first video that we're going to project onto the fabric that we take the final filming of.
Yes, and this is, we filmed the pieces on the fabric. We had 10 panels of fabric that we made ourselves, and my acrobat husband here climbed those ladders.
Yeah, you're a 64-year-old guy that should be crawling up and down ladders like a monkey.
And we did all the work ourselves. We went in there and we suspended them. I made them, and we used these sheer fabrics. We had several panels behind this one you see in the front. And Thompson's Point is a really wonderful historic industrial site that I met a woman who knows of. There's a great winery there that we discovered when we did this project.
And there's also a pretty good brewery.
Yeah,
Check out the beer
the
guys.
beer is great there. But they sponsored us. They usually rent this out for events, and I told them about my project. And this one man who owns this, he was one of my associates or advisors when I wrote my graduate thesis, and he remembered me, and he was willing to give this, he was willing to sponsor this for us, so we were really incredibly grateful. Our objective
We had to
is,
film it at night, so we weren't interrupting anything. We had to go in the middle of the night because we wanted it dark. It had to be pitch black, and then we could project it so that this fabric was floating in space, and this was an amazing sound stage. I mean, it was a huge environment. This is probably from here to the floor. This is 20 feet. So up to the ceiling, it had to be 45 feet.
yeah, at least, yeah.
And it's just a cool place.
Yeah. So we wanted a sense of monumentality with it, and I do feel we captured it. I wanted to also create a sense of a three-dimensional space that we are recreating with just simple panels of fabric, a sense of being in a quarry. And that's what we are projecting. It is fragmented because it's broken up with these layers of fabric, like time and like even film, and going into another dimension. These are shadows. These are not clear images. And as Judd said, when we put it onto the building, it's even going to be more so. You can see the line and the drape of the fabric, like Christo. And I've also been very influenced by Krzysztof Radzisko, a Polish artist who projects.
More like a Katomski.
I have been inspired and influenced, but I do feel I've blended what Christo has done and Radzisko with the projections of images onto the building. His work is political. This isn't political. This is more of a social history. But what we'll do is...
By the way, this is the first time we projected it onto a building. So you guys are getting a dry run tonight.
Yeah, we haven't seen it ourselves, so this is definitely...
I was out there adjusting, waiting for it to get dark enough to have it be seen on the building. I want to say one real quick thing about the music. Before I was talking about how you pick out different things and what you want to project. I was going to start out with try to do Appalachian style music, and then, well, that doesn't really cover everything. And then I started thinking about all the different influences of all the different music and the perfect blend of all this. Because a lot of the story culminates in the 40s and 50s, the birth of rockabilly, which is a lot of different types of Appalachian music. You have Scottish fiddling, you have blues, you have all these things that merge into rockabilly. So that's kind of where I went with, and we ended up with a 145. I play, usually when you do these, I play different instruments, so I play all the different pieces. It's a lot easier than getting somebody to show up and hey, listen. And the other person that helps me out a lot is my son, who is also a multi-instrumentalist, but he played banjo in this piece, and that gave it a little bit of the earthy feel to it. So. And we still try to capture the working thing, and you are going to hear hammer hits in this, and we recorded those over at Tennessee Marble Company with Lana Kagawa. She had one of her workers there, John...
Cherry.
Anyway, he was sitting there hammering, chiseling on a piece of marble, and the sound was so awesome. It's like ringing a bell. And so I recorded that, and it's not really, really clear in the big spectrum, but if you listen really hard, you can hear a hit, and then you can hear a piece of marble flake. And so you hear that, it's in the piece. So that's an actual guy working on a piece of marble. So that's it.
So if you join us out in the courtyard for the presentation, it's a 10-minute loop that we will, he's got to go get himself. It's a 10-minute loop, and so we're going to run it twice because you'll be able to pick up things the second time around that you perhaps didn't pick up in the first.